So this is a slide deck that I made fairly recently, but there's not much new content in it. But I like to be provocative if I can, because what people remember is significant emotional experiences. So if I can throw out something that kind of gets your blood moving, like this question, I like doing that. And the real gift for me was reading this book, The Challenger Launch Decision. As you know, I was personally involved with Challenger, had a payload in the cargo bay, and thought the problem was technical. And I read this book when I was at the University of Colorado, a decade. Well, let's see, the Challenger was 86. I was there in 94, so 8 years later. And the thing that really spoke to me, this book by Diane Vaughn, why did they proceed to launch when all the data suggested otherwise? This was a shocker for me because I thought they didn't have the data. I thought that the problem was that they were so far outside the thermal limits that they believed they're going to launch in, but they had the technical data and they ignored it. So why did that happen? And she said it's about the sociology of the thing. Confirmation bias is the thing I'd put it up to. And this sentence just spoke to me. It is unfortunate that the sociological explanation is the correct one, as these invisible and unacknowledged forces elude remedy. This really got me thinking about this, because the idea of invisible and unacknowledged forces that cause this was just a fascinating idea. And so it's sort of consistent with modern physics. Einstein changed physics from talking about forces to talking about fields with his work with general relativity. I named this social context fields, and we can both measure and manage these fields with the 4D system that a friend of mine calls human physics. That's the upshot of the thing. Comments, questions?
Karen, you know what? I have a question. Perhaps for us, but also for all the listeners, if you can put it into the context. So the event that led you to write the book and the Challenger, what are the years when they happened? So what happened first?
Well, the Challenger launched in 86. Okay. And what's interesting is I brought my staff together, and they're experienced people in space program. And I said, it was, I think, January, February 86, something like that. Said, when are we going to resume launching? Because I had a dozen or more payloads on the space shuttle, including Hubble was getting ready to launch. And we thought they'd be launching in the summer, because what we said was, if the problem was cold weather, that we thought that this was the general opinion of my staff, that we'd be launching. It turns out that we did not understand the political nature of this thing. We're not politicians. So it turned out shuttle was stood down for 3.5 years. So the shuttle came back, and one of the earliest payloads to fly again was Hubble in 1990. And so it's a longer story, but I put together the servicing mission and managed it for about 1.5 years. And we had a new head of NASA, a new administrator, and I'd known him probably better than anyone from working with the TRW. He was a senior vice president there, and I had a lot of work at TRW. And so he came in and he pulled me up in a kind of an awkward way into the front office, because he wanted me close to him. And he was a smart guy, but he's a 1D blue, kind of a personality like Donald Trump, but except not stupid. And but that same brashness and same way of attacking people and whatnot. He saw the NASA workforce as his enemy. Imagine that. So anyway, I helped stabilize him for about 6 months, 8 months. And just like almost all the people that got around Trump and got tired of him and left, I got tired of left. And so it's probably more you want to know, but I was interested in moving to Boulder for various reasons. And I applied for a job as the deputy of a University Center for Atmospheric Research, a big consortium that included space physics, which I was pretty familiar with, and atmospheric physics, which I was not. And they had 100 applicants, they told me, and they called me up and said, we're down to the last two. And I said, I got to find out what this job is about, and you're one of them. So they said, don't come out here. So I flew out there anyway. There's no guards. And walked into the building. I'd never been in the building before. It's this little, if you've ever been to Boulder, you're familiar with it, this thing that IMP designed up on the hill. So and I saw the names of the people on the search committee because I went up to the executive level. And I walked in and sat down and said, what's this job about? And they said that the director has broken all his relationships, including the sponsors in Washington. We need someone to repair the broken relationships. And I said, take my name off the list. I can't do that for somebody else. That's not how it works. So when I left, I told this head of NASA, Dan Golden's his name, and the chief of staff, that I'm probably going to take this job. So when I came back, before I could say anything, they said to me, if you'll stay with NASA, we'll give you a sabbatical for a year. So I extended it to 2 years, negotiated that, and ended up back in Boulder at University of Colorado, working in the business school. And what I wanted to do is before I read this book, I was already aware of the social effects on management, because the chairman of the Failure Review Board, when he told the Congress how we spent 15 years and what would be $5 billion in today's money and built a useless telescope, he said the root cause was a leadership failure. And I was leader of the team. Nobody blamed me because nobody saw anything I had done wrong. But I got interested in this problem. So I went to business school, got a faculty position, and that's how I met Nat. And I taught 3 courses there for 2 years. So that's the timeline of all this. I was supposed to go back to NASA. I was very torn about this because if I went back for 5 more years, I'd have a gigantic pension, because I was now the highest paid you could get as a civil servant. And the way the pension works, they average your 5 years. So if I went back for 5 more years, or 3 more years even, I could retire with this gigantic pension. But if I went on what the job I'd go back to, probably be back with this guy. And I thought if I go spend 3 years with him, I might not survive it. So I ended up staying with no work, basically, and formed 4D company, and that went on from there. So that's how it all happened. Is that helpful?
It is helpful, and hello, and I apologize for being late. My class just lasted 10 more minutes than usual.
So all this was complete happenstance. You know, if Hubble had a good mirror, none of this would ever happen. That's how fate works, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I thought we would just go quickly through these. We've done all this quick review here, social context, and the fact that we're hyper tribal. You see that more and more every day. The idea that these fields are like Mother Nature's, they work the same way. I used the example of gravitational fields and electromagnetic fields. The 2 drivers or the leader's behaviors, number 1, and which then feeds into the team members' behavioral norms that become the dominant force. And this outrageous claim that Challenger could have been prevented. And the root cause was, in my opinion, that for NASA, so organizations want to persist. People at NASA loved doing it. We couldn't imagine not having a NASA. And the space shuttle was the replacement for Apollo. The original idea was a shuttle and a space station. And at that time, Nixon was president and said, you can have one or the other. So the administrator at the time picked the shuttle. They needed a story to why they needed a shuttle. And they said it's cheap access to space. But as time went on, it became obvious it's extraordinarily expensive. And the only solution to that was to launch more often. So there was enormous pressure to launch. And then Hubble's mirror, of course, classic confirmation bias and an atmospheric criticism. This incredible story about Korean Airlines. I just recently looked at another crash video of these people. This there's a problem that's called cockpit differential. And when you have a very, very senior pilots and very, very junior first officers and a culture where you can't criticize seniors, one person cannot fly a jet airplane. It's impossible. So that was the cause of that. And then even the Tenerife airport, the most senior, again, cockpit differential power, the most senior statesman of the airline was piloting. The first officer was on the radio. That's normally what you do. One person flies, the other person monitors, it's called. And call comes in, that's a garble call. The pilot pulls up. The first officer says, I didn't hear a takeoff clearance in that. And he sort of glares at him, happens again. They go down the runway, hit a Pan Am on the runway. And this train was the same thing. And even the Fukushima Daiichi and the 737 MAX, it's all the same stuff. So I claim all these could have been prevented if people acknowledged the fields that were unacknowledged and measured them. And this is the three common factors in the examples I picked: obedience to authorities, unfounded optimism, avoiding criticism overrides everything, and then appropriate indifference to senior authorities. So, and here were some things about the system and how you use it. And the idea that physics really is about analysis. Analysis is a fancy word for simplify. And just like, again, a sort of a physical example, a prism, a lot of things were discovered when they discovered lights could be separated with prisms into constituent wavelengths. And this little system does the same thing with humans. I continue to find this very useful to understand people's behaviors by these colors. The people who prefer intuitive information and emotional deciding innately care about people, and I colored them green because they're naturally appreciative and empathetic. The people who are emotional deciders and sense information, oh, that's about emotions in the moment. That's about relationship. I named this including because that's the biggest, most powerful need. Those of us that live in intuition and logic, we love to think about novel things, visioning, blue sky thinking, and people with logic and sense that's about organization and process, that kind of thing. Then the idea of the analogy with the fields. By the way, anyone wants me to slow down and animate through a slide, I can happily do so. I'm trying to just bring us up to speed sort of quickly here.
Yeah, Charlie, if you can,
Yes.
you can slow down this and just really the next slide. No, where there was yeah, the behaviors, yeah. Because
Yeah.
just if you would just start from the
I
scratch.
had a sense you might want this. That's why I paused and said it here.
Yeah.
So I call these dimensions, and I call them dimensions because the quadrants is the other term that would seem to apply, and that's just too stale. These are not really 4 dimensions. That's just the word I came up with. And the green one, the cultivating dimension, is about caring for people. And it's about deep values, particularly humanistic values. People that live in this place tend to gravitate towards nonprofits or education things or save the planet at the UN, this kind of thing. And the including people care about relationships, they're friendly. These, you scratch a salesman, you'll find this. If you think about this, when you go to a automobile dealership, which buy a car, I had this experience when I bought the Leaf. Everyone in the showroom is your instant friend. You feel so comfortable there. And that's because that's about typically sales. We buy relationships, we buy trust and feel good. The visioning, we care about innovation and ideas. And finally, the directing. What I find interesting about this dynamically is that if you're most interested, for example, in intuitive information and emotional deciding, you're least interested in logical thinking and sensing. So the diagonals are the challenges across here. So for anybody that finds their home, and each of us know where it is, the job is to not let the diagonal weaken you. Comments, questions, thoughts? Okay,
Yeah, this is basically the classic of the 4 dimensions, and
this is it.
this is it. The only thing that always sort of not confuses me, it's not the right word, but I don't know if uh basically on practice, when I think about blue, and I have number of examples, but they were visioning, but they were very difficult people to work with.
They are, because they don't care about relationship.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
because I don't know, for me this is as challenging as working with orange. For some reason, I don't know why, but maybe just the the story of my sort of experience. But sometimes it's very difficult to really adjust and adapt to a blue as much as to
yeah,
orange.
the blues are just, I just say it again, that they don't care about relating with you. You're irrelevant to them. That what they care about is living in their head with their ideas.
So what to do?
You got to recognize that and work on developing your diagonal, no matter who you are. So for me, I knew something. I was a manager running a big program, and fortunately, visioning and innovation was really valuable there with the work I was doing. But I always knew something was the matter. I didn't have, excuse me, the relationships that I needed with people who weren't blue. I could relate very easily with my blue friends. We all get together and do idea challenges. This guy who was the difficult head of NASA, he was a blue, and he and I got along great. We would try and out innovate each other. That was the whole entirety of our relationship. Who could come up faster with the coolest new idea? And yet, so I had a annual feedback with my boss at the time, who was a person I was quite fond of, and he was blue, but he was 4D. And he said, "Charlie, you would do better if you could learn to suffer fools gladly." What he was talking about is that you who live in the blue, we have no difficulty with people that are our intellectual peers. That's okay. But anybody else, we tend to look down at them. And that's kind of in each of, that's a dynamic that's pervasive throughout this. So I took that to heart, and I began to treat people who were, let's just say, not particularly intellectually gifted, but who I needed to do something for me, with much more compassion and respect. And so that process probably took a year or two to build out, and it wasn't easy at first. So I think for Frank's a green, and it's funny to watch him. He's afraid of getting bitten by this. So the way it shows up is when Frank is going to do a workshop, he brings two of every piece of equipment, 2 computers, 2 projectors, 2 sets of cables, 2 everything. He sets them up the night before, verifies that they work, comes in the morning, sets them up again, verifies that they all work, studies the material, because he's this is his Achilles heel, this orange. And
Yeah.
so for me, I bring this stuff in the morning, I plug it in together, and if it doesn't work, I'll just wing it. So that's just how we are. So I think this is the dynamic that underlies everything. And the reason this is important is when you talk about these forces in these fields, the way a physicist approaches this, and that's what I am, my core, we look for the underlying piece. So using this system, you can take a work team and you can diagram this with the relative strengths in each of these areas. And what's interesting is that the emotional side is more important because that's where our deep innate needs are. We need to feel appreciated. So Chairman Xi is visiting, talking with Biden. I was reading about the preparations for that meeting. Everything is built around respecting him. That's what he needs. He needs the essence of the whole issue with China and us is that China wants to be included as an equal peer on the world stage, and we don't accept that. we've gotten used to running the world our way. And so we say, these are the rules, and they're reasonable, you should obey them. And China says, well, that they're your rules. We have our rules. And we say, your rules don't count, our rules count, because we've been so that's what it's all about. This need and the need to be included as an equal in the world community. That's what China wants. The US doesn't want to give them that, because we still see them as inferior beings fundamentally, because we see ourselves as extending largesse. That is what they need to survive, and they don't want that kind of relationship. They don't want us to be Papa US to child China. So anyway, what you can do with this is you can take, and we've done this many times, walk into an organization, look at how they how they deal with the 4 parts. And if you're missing any parts, and especially the emotional side, it's going to kill you. And the problem is that we get a lot of training on the logical side. The universities and educational system values ideas, so you get to master that. Mom values pick up your socks, keep your room neat, whatever. You learn that there. Nobody teaching this.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Charlie.
that's the deal. So the behaviors, expressing authentic appreciation, and the way you make it authentic is with the mindset of gratitude. And you say it, or more importantly, you do it, and you address shared interests, act on what do they want, I can offer them also. And that's hopefully what's happening with, I hope that, and I assume that Chairman Xi and Biden people have both done a lot of homework to identify and address the shared interest, which there's many with us in China. Then the behavior to welcome you as a member of our team and keep all your agreements. We don't do that very well. By the way, I just heard recently, we're apparently the only country in the world that has not agreed that nuclear weapons will only be used after we're attacked first. We hold the right to use them first.
Yeah.
Unfortunate realities. This is huge. The courage to face the truth and respond to it. And then 100% committed. Be sure you're right, then go ahead. No tolerance for drama. Turn complaints into requests. Own your role in creating the mess. Stay out of blamer. And choosing to be accountable for what you do or fail to do or ask others to do. So these are not necessarily the only behaviors you could pick. These are the best fit that I know. But I don't argue that the behaviors are absolutely fundamental. I think they're really good ones. That there could be some variance on this. I can't think of any. But what's fundamental is the 4 dimensions they address, however you do that. So there could be some variation in behaviors. I don't know, but these meet rigorous tests. So when you do these, what happens? Well, when you express authentic appreciation, you create an atmosphere of mutual respect and open, honest communications. That's our problem with China. We really don't respect them mutually. And it's just human nature. And so we don't have open, honest communications with them. Shared interests. What's interesting about this is that it creates an atmosphere of willing collaboration. In fact, I may have talked about this before. I did a lot of speeches when I was in China, and the China Aerospace awarded me honorary professorship. Now, to the US mind, the Western mind, that's kind of weird, not a university, but that's the thing they do in China. If they want to honor you, they make you a professor. So I was going to make an acceptance speech for a big audience, and I wanted to explain the 8 behaviors, and I thought the shared interest is the most difficult one to articulate in a brief time. So that morning I picked up the China newspaper, and the headline was U.S. delegation that comes to China to address shared interests. I said, go read about it in Mandarin, get the Chinese version of the newspaper. We okay so far with this?
Yes, thank you.
Inclusion. So if people feel excluded, the common expression in the US is they go postal. They destroy and disrupt. Rigorously keeping agreements, well, that destroys your trustworthiness. How important is trustworthiness? That I'm going to submit that affects every dimension of your life. And addressing unfortunate realities, a high-functioning environment effectively responds to difficulties. So, think about the U.S. Congress. If they could just simply do this, how much better off we would be. Then 100% committed. So what this is about is, I see this in people very commonly. They announce they're going to do something and never do it. So I think Peter Drucker said it, that the problem in my life is not knowing what to do. The problem is actually doing it. This 100% commitment is a place of focus that lets you do what's important and ignore distractions like your personal peril. Of course, no tolerance for drama. The issue with drama is it misdirects your energy. What's more important than your energy? Other than trustworthiness, maybe, I don't know. But if you're a victim, you decide it's hopeless and do nothing. And you get a club together to reinforce that. And if you're a blamer, you put your energy into anger against others when you're angry at yourself. And then finally, choosing to be accountable, to focus on the results you're accountable to produce. And when I worked as a consultant, as someone was bemoaning their fate, asked this question, what are you accountable to produce? And usually I'd hear crickets. If you don't know that, we've talked a lot about all these things. Is this reinforcement okay?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, every time we go through it, I pick up a new little
Little
jewel.
nuance to it. I think what's interesting about this is it's incredibly simple. At the same time, it's incredibly deep. It's both at once.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is the essence. We can stop here. Of course, AMBR process. You ever think about how special your attention is? You ever been in a relationship where, children will actually misbehave to get attention. They'd rather have negative attention than no attention. That's our need to have it. And then I really pay attention to this when I'm driving and getting older. I try and be careful about where my attention goes. And if someone's on my bumper in the back, I tell myself, don't let that distract me, because what matters is what's in front of the car. So I just tune it out. So I think of attention as almost like how you would deal with money. I think the successful way you deal with money is just another form of energy. Actually, is you make sure that your needs are less than what you have to spend. The same with attention. You manage where you put it. So with money, you prioritize it to what's most important, and with attention, you got to do the same thing. And when you focus it, it alters your perception. That's the state of 100% commitment. It's a state of almost meditative focus on what you need to get done. And mindset, crucial to everything. And you ask yourself, once you just place your attention, you ask yourself, what's the self-talk in the background? That's your storyline you're running. And you check whether it's going to take you to where you want to go. And if not, you change it. And how do you change it? You change it. The simplest formula is you add empathy and accountability. You add the two diagonals, the green and the orange. So you empathize with whoever is misdirecting your attention because you're angry or distracted. And then you empathize with them. And then you decide what results you're going to focus on. Then you do it. And for some people, I think this may be the stumbling block here. I don't know. And the process will give you good results. And one of the biggest problems we have is we never stop to sort of enjoy the results. I worked with a proposal team, and was a very grueling process. They won a $10 billion contract in a tough competition. I worked with them for like 2 years on it. So after they got the win announcement, I went in to see the vice president and said, have you stopped to enjoy the moment? No, we can't. Now we got to figure out how we're going to do this. And I thought, can't you just stop for an hour and enjoy the accomplishment? So I think I've told you this story, but it's something that you might, and Darinka might want to think about. I used to get the newest person in the organization to go around and interview everybody at the end of the year for what we accomplished and write it down. Then I had them assemble into a PowerPoint presentation, and we had a pizza brought in, went to a conference room and spent an hour looking at what we accomplished collectively, and we couldn't believe it. It was mind-blowing, because you don't take the trouble to do that, and that energizes everything and lets you go back through the loop again. So just to stop, and so the other problem is that we talk about rewarding teamwork, but we don't do it. All the rewards are for individuals. The way NASA does it is, at the end of the year, they have group achievement awards. And this creates more trouble than it's worth, because by the end of the year, people forgot who really contributed. You leave people out. So a friend of mine at TRW, when they completed a big project called AXAF, he had been in workshops with me. So what he did was he said there's gonna be a poster in our office, and everyone who contributed to AXAF, put it out in the company newsletter, come sign your name to the poster and pick up a t-shirt. And they had hundreds of people they never would have thought of, because the program lasted 8 years, who came in and talked about what they did. And again, you avoid this exclusion. So, okay, good.
Yep, very good. Thank you.
Then this context shifting worksheet, which I'd not thought about this till Nat mentioned it. Yes, Darinka, sure.
Oh, Charlie, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. We missed a break. So I'm okay
Oh,
for us.
okay. I'm on a balance board, but go ahead. Let's get everybody moving. Thank you, Darinka. Wow, I'm getting creaky. You have to do this more often. I read the article I put in the newsletter about the dangers of sitting. And so I'm now standing instead of doing the exercise. Maybe the exercises should be done more. But I'm on an elevated desk with a balance board under me. It's a board with kind of a plastic dome on it. So I've got to stay balanced here. So one of the good things about having your house burned down is you can get some new furniture. And so you guess I had a desk Junko got me as a present I couldn't get rid of. So anyway.
I do have a question for you regarding the previous slide.
Yes.
So you were talking about results and taking a pause for and giving attention to good results. So we do have practice of doing something which is called a retrospective. So after a major run, then when the process is over, the group gets together, and it's typically facilitated. But then differently than what you were saying, they actually go over what worked and what could be better. So does that, like, how do you, because when you spoke about it, you were talking about awards and recognitions, but not about this other aspects of looking at.
I think that's what we would call that a lessons learned exercise, and that's a different thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that accomplishes the same thing as the self-appreciation does. I think, you know, it's a good thing to do for sure, but to me, it's to purely enjoy the results without that is a different thing and maybe important in a different way. I wouldn't, I would make, what I'm talking about is the energization of pure appreciation, and especially for the group. That's what to me is left out so much.
Okay, thank you.
You know, the lessons learned things are valuable, but a different kind of energy in it. Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, then I had not thought much about this until Nat pointed it out, but the context shifting worksheet is AMBR. It kind of came up unconsciously. And again, I'm not going to talk through the worksheet unless you want me to. This is this remarkable thing that changed the entire organization and how to do it. And I think this may be about where we got last time. So this is about how to do this. And I think the important thing here is to start with data. So why? Business organizations are inherently orange, overwhelmingly orange led. And the reason is they're about results that are quantitative. In your case, Darinka, there's probably measures you're being held to. In a typical company, it's primarily profitability so you can survive. And that's, without that, you don't continue to exist. So I think data is king in this thing. So I would find a group of people that with somebody willing to do this. When I started doing this big contract for NASA, I said there's two rules I will not violate. One is I will not work with a team that doesn't want to do this because it's a waste of time. And secondly, I'll never share their data with you. The data only go to the people that it came from. And people often want to combine teams to save money on this thing, which we charge $500 for. I said, don't do that, because what you're going to have is if you got a low score, that they're going to blame the other people. So they got to own it. So then give everybody a copy of the book. It's not about the royalties from the book. They don't matter. It's just about the fact that this is a inexpensive reference document. This of itself does not do anything, but it does provide background to understand what's going to be done in briefer forms. And Amazon still sells it, but in a version a print version I don't like as much. But anyway, it's okay. Then use this online tool or use the paper tools. And as I said before, I stood down the online tool some years ago. Mainly it was expensive to maintain, but the bigger problem was people kept asking me to troubleshoot it, and I didn't write the code. I don't write C++ code and don't know how to fix things that go wrong in it. It was a monstrously complex thing. And then you asked me earlier, Darinka, about why and when and why I wrote the book, and I'll tell you in a minute. That wasn't in the story I told. But the way that when I put this together, I thought the first thing I should do is help people understand why we're measuring this behavior. I'm fond of that kind of teaching way of management. Then the idea of how are you going to measure against the normalization of deviance, this place where behavior that is deviant in some absolute sense becomes normalized locally, which came from Diane Vaughn's book, that expression, and the idea of measuring against the standard, and then scoring behavioral norms for a team. And these are just arbitrary numbers I made up assigned to these. I think I had a different scale, but I tried to exaggerate a little bit and change quickly to this. So what people do is they read the standard about, for example, what authentic appreciation looks like. And the standard is HAPS: habitually, authentically, proportionally, specifically, promptly. And does the team members always meet this? They get 100 points, never 0, kind of intuitive things. And there were in-between choices. And then comments. And so the way it worked was if you scored it really high or really low, what I found out is that's what people wanted to know about. Why did you do it really high or really low? And that's what people asked about. So it would prompt you to do that. You didn't have to do it. But the comments became arguably the most interesting source of action items. Then I had this sort of static reminder in there to show just what it looks like. Then an action item worksheet, which you don't need, but it could be helpful. Basically, I tried to get people to agree to do the next one while they're in the room with this one. Then decide if they want a workshop or not, and most people wanted a workshop. Generate action items, then name someone in the organization, hopefully with some influence to keep people's attention on this. Again, where attention goes, power flows. And there's all the work issues crowd this out. If you don't have someone to say, let's go back to how we appreciate each other in staff meetings, or let's do this, you're going to lose it. Then who did it? Just to simply know whose data you're looking at. That's the only thing that identifies people by name. And this is the static display, what it looks like. And this is kind of to give people some kind of intuitive idea of what the social context is like, depending on where you benchmark. So if you're in the bottom quintile, and there are other words could describe this, but people feel unappreciated, they become selfish, exclusionary, angry, untrustworthy. Blind optimism replaces reality, and because it's not reality, they're uncommitted. There's blame and complain others, and there's no accountability. Here, they're appreciative and generous with data, time, attention, inclusive and trustworthy, realistically optimistic, and 100% committed, effective and accountable. So that's kind of the difference. And I think people, what I'm after here is that I think you can intuitively look at this and say, this is a place I wouldn't want to live in and probably doesn't work very well. This is a place I'd like to live in and probably going to work pretty well. So it's kind of another teaching moment. And then people often will try and say, well, it doesn't apply to me because, and what I explain is that I like to think about what color you are in this scheme, what quintile, and measured over many, many thousands of measurements. These boundaries have never moved more than plus or minus 1%, whether it's countries, occupations, maybe a couple of percent. And the data is not that accurate. The measurement's inaccurate for various reasons. Here's a team I picked at random. You see this journal upward trend as they continue to do this. But, you know, you might get a setback. You might lose a big competition, or you might have a company-wide layoff or whatever. So it's not, I could have picked one that was monotonic, but I'm not trying to sort of sell anything here. And then this is a really interesting piece of this, how differently, this is how differently people see the same thing. They're all looking at the same team's behavioral norms. These people see it as very negative, and these people think it's wonderful. This is a trend over time. This is an earlier measurement. The thing tends to, as that arrows is really averaging all these scores. And I think this is fascinating how differently people see it. And what I say is that the first thing managers tend to do, inexperienced managers, you tend to say, well, that's a bad person, that's a good person. No, that's not helpful to you. What's helpful is to say it's a social context issue and what's going on. And if you're running a group of a dozen or 20 people, you know who these people are pretty accurately. You know who's happy there, who's not.
But when you're doing the test, it's anonymous, correct?
It's anonymous, completely anonymous.
Yeah. Okay.
I say, by the way, people break the anonymity often with how they comment. So you know, if you put in there the boss is a big jerk, the boss probably knows who that is. You know, so but there's no connection. That's fact. There's lots and lots of effort not to scramble stuff as it goes through in our version. So you can't track like a comment on a page doesn't track the comment from the previous page. So you can't like look at the top comment and put a pattern together. Lots of things to protect that.
Okay.
But if you're running the joint, you know, I mean, you know who walks into your office smiling and having a good day and who's not. And but treat this as a social context problem. The story that's more effective is the people are generally okay. but they're not matched well to the social context. And they've been perhaps disserviced by a supervisor, maybe by you or by somebody before. They're in a job that they don't like to do. They may be a green in an orange job. They may be in a job they can't do. And I've had project managers who the primary job is managing people. And they said things when they got these low scores about them, they said things like, I don't like working with people. I like to go in my office and do technical work. So a big mistake that happens in technical organizations is you take a person who's really gifted technically and put them in charge of something, and they're not, their ego doesn't let them want to believe they can't do it. But when they get in the job and then they don't like doing it, you're headed for failure. So I would work with those people and work with the management to get them back into a technical job in a way that saves their pay and their status. So this is really powerful stuff for personnel management, I think.
Sorry, one more question.
Yeah.
Do you focus on the top end as well? So like, we've got some outliers at the bottom of the scale here.
The thing I've done in briefing these is I've asked in the room whether who scored this and are they gaming it, and usually they'll tell me. And so like some lady raised her hand and said, that's me. Said this is my dream to work at a place like Ball Aerospace. My whole life I lived for this. The work we're doing is fantastic. It's benefit of all mankind, NASA work. I'm just every day I get up and think how lucky I am to have a job like this. And so it's authentic with them. But I don't I'm sort of too much of a management by exception guy, I guess. So what you want to do is rehabilitate these people and get them up in here. And these people are kind of like don't need a lot of attention.
Gotcha.
So
you're not worried too much about like I'm not sure if false positive is quite the right word, but like I've had some folks, as I've been working through some of this with my team, where they're overly positive about their performance against the standard.
That's a different problem, but I think yeah, so that's a different problem. The trick here is that people have to be convinced that although this is an evaluative looking tool, that's not its purpose. It is information for improvement.
Yeah.
If they can't make that shift, then people might actually misrepresent this.
Right. Okay.
But I think if you do this as a part of this whole process with the workshop and the introductory material and the whole bit, and the manager, when the data come out, not punishing anybody or not using it to limit anybody, they're going to see that that's how it works. And I think one of the positive thing about the human condition, I think generally we want to do better, don't we? I think people want to do better. They're happier doing better. This is a graph that we sort of generated just for completeness sake, but I find it really interesting. Frank's got a tale about being in this job at Goddard, and there was a guy who was a union member that was just a thorn in his side. And government unions are odd because they can't negotiate for any of the things unions normally negotiate. They can't negotiate for pay. That's set by civil service rules. They can't negotiate for anything that is work hours. That's set by rules. So they tend to take up like fringe issues. This guy was just making trouble for Frank every day. So he brings him into his office and says, "Tell me your story. What's going on?" He said, "To me, it looks like you're a reasonable guy, but what's this about?" And the guy had been a programmer and annoyed some previous supervisor who demoted him into some meaningless job. And Frank said, "Let's put you back in where you want to be." And the guy became Frank's biggest supporter. All the nonsense stopped. So these are things that you got to root out and figure out what's going on. And if you if you run a storyline that the person's bad, you're never going to get there. Frank ran a storyline that said, let's see what the problem is. Let's not name a person bad. So this is a powerful manager mindset shift. So if people are over, rating what their contribution is, I think you can have an honest chat and ask them, why I don't see it that way. Would you tell me why? There might be some element of fear, like, they're gonna lose their job otherwise. I don't know, but the most important, this guy on 60 Minutes said the most important word in the English language is and. So that's just what I was talking about. And so this is a useful chart. So you can't do but so many things, and I would recommend to look at the lowest ranking behavior. They all interrelate. Once you keep your agreements better, feel more included, shared interest, everything. So that they all interconnect. To me, these 8 behaviors are like an 8-sided gem looking into the core through different windows. They're all come together. So I just will highlight this as the one that has the highest leverage. And so for the next 2 or 3 months, while you wait till the next measurement, focus on doing this better. And so where attention goes, power flows. So this works. That's what it looked like. This is the explanation of the behavior, why we're measuring it. There's the standard, and that gets reproduced in the reports with the old software. And then here's the comments that help. By the way, what's fascinating is that the scoring will often not match the comments. But anyway, so I discovered early on that the team leader is the key here. So I briefed the reports to the team leader, and they briefed the report to the team. And this is what some people call action learning. It just means you take data and act on it. And there are 3 things that come out of this. If you're a bottom quintile team, you've got the 7 deadly sins, you need to have consulting help. And you can do that. Then do individuals need IDAs and need a workshop or not? Those are the 3 decisions you take. And then importantly, to reschedule redo it. Again, repetition is the magic. So why I wrote the book? I wrote the book because in 2008, one of my guys did this analysis. And he took 200 teams roughly, and he grouped all the ones that started their first measurement down here. He looked at how their score changed with each subsequent measurement. And this was astounding. This was something I couldn't imagine this would be the case. And that this kind of performance improvement, I think you could argue this is indicative of profitability, competitive advantage. May not be exactly 7%, but it's surely constructive. And so this blew my mind. This was so powerful. Books don't work. Workshops are of questionable importance, but this tool did it. The power of repetition and clarity, and did it for this whole suite of people. And I saw this and said, there's never been a thing like this in existence. I've never heard of anything like this to make this kind of improvement consistently across all this 200 pieces of data. So that day I decided to write the book and started drafting it. And I said, this work belongs to the world. I made all the intellectual property public. Before then it had been held under lock and key. So we'll stop here. Time for a couple minutes, questions or comments. Was this a useful session today?
Yeah, very useful, Charlie. Again, my apologies. I've been a few minutes late because of my class dismissal.
Larisa, step 1.
All right.
I broke my agreement.
I broke my agreement.
Define the circumstances.
The circumstances were my students didn't let me go, and that's why that's completely my fault, because I should have established much better agreements with my students.
Next step, future prevention.
Future prevention. I will establish much clearer communication and requirements with my students going forward. And that will never happen again. If I am able to show up for the class, I will be there on time.
And finally, are we okay now?
Are we okay now?
Yep, you're good.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
We okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm okay. See you next week. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Excellent.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
everyone.